Great. Good morning. So my name is Chris. We are talking this morning about sharing our repair stories, and it's something that we have been really interested in thinking about, and how we go about organising our repair cafes, and how telling stories is part of what we do, and how we communicate what we do. So we want to start by saying a little bit about our own story and how we got involved, and then have some opportunities to share later on about, I suppose, the role that storytelling has, and opportunities that it opens up for us. So first of all, we thought we'd better start with our own stories and how we came to be here. We are the Repair Cafe Belfast is the first repair cafe in Northern Ireland. Started about 2.5 years ago. I suppose I was the kind of instigator, or the person who put it out there and asked people if they'd like to get involved, if they had heard about this idea. And I came to it by really being on a bit of a career break. I had been working for a really big organisation, and my background is in journalism and campaigning. And I just kind of had done a lot of writing about things and thinking about things and talking about them. And I just really wanted to do something practical and tangible that I could touch in my hands, and something that was much more local and much more connected with the people right around me in my community, rather than something that was way out there and far away. And I was also expecting my third child, and so, taking a bit of time out from work because of that as well. So I had long had a mending pile that just grew and grew and became a mending shelf and a mending bookcase and a room, and I was very frustrated about the difficulty in getting that stuff fixed, and had few of the skills, I suppose, to do it myself, other than a bit of a botch job. So I'm not a fixer, and I'm not somebody who mends things when they come to the repair cafe. But what I can do is maybe organise things and start the ball rolling. So I put the word out to see if anyone else was interested, if anyone else thought this was a good idea. And that's how I met Lee. And I will seamlessly hand over to Lee at this point and come back and tell you a little bit about the development of our first event and things after that.
Yeah, so weirdly, like Chris, I was kind of at the same point in my life. I had just left a big organisation. That my background's in grant making, so I suppose similar to Chris, with kind of facilitating other people to do stuff, but not getting my hands dirty myself. That was what I felt like was missing from my life, and various things had happened over a couple of years, and I had decided that it was time for me to step up, use some of my skills, and also change the way I was living my life. And I think that's, part of our message as well. This is about personal change, and that's connection to systemic change. And so when Chris put the word out on social media, I had seen something about repair cafes a few years before and thought it was a really brilliant idea. Deeply concerned about my impact on the planet, and what we're doing collectively, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to get involved in that. I think that's a fantastic idea. And Chris and I met, and lots of other people got involved as well. Like, our story is not just about us. And like Chris, I'm not a fixer. Although, right, that's kind of a fluid term, and I think that that's interesting. Like we have to reflect on what that means for us. So I don't necessarily fix things at a repair cafe, but I have, with my dad, fixed my electric shower. I have fixed my dishwasher a number of times. I sew and I knit, and I've got more interested in darning and using those skills to repair, and I'm really obsessed with visible mending of clothes. So that fixer state is kind of fluid, I think, as well, and part of our work is helping people see themselves differently and seeing their skills differently. So yeah, I just was like, yeah, I'm ready to get involved in something. Like Chris, we do the kind of organising stuff behind the scenes, to make the magic happen, and corral our fixers and all our other volunteers who are all equally valued, to come together in Belfast and hold wonderful events that are full of lovely stories.
Let me just ask Leigh if she can see the chat, because I still can't see it.
I can't see anything in the chat at all.
We were so excited to have all these questions coming in and all this feedback, and we've got no idea what's going on out there. So, James, I don't know if that's something you can help us with, but we'll carry on in the meantime. One of the things that has been really helpful to us in sharing our stories is we've got some beautiful pictures, and we wanted to just put on for maybe 5 or 10 minutes just some slides that should kind of visualize our repair cafe, and to talk a little bit around the stories that go with them, so that you can get a sense of what we some of the ways that we use kind of pictures and stories to talk about what we do. And this is a picture of us at our very first repair cafe. All those people in that photograph, hopefully you can see it okay. We hadn't met each other, and none of us had ever set foot in a repair cafe ever, because there hadn't been one in Northern Ireland. So we were completely winging it. I don't know if you can tell, but I was 7 months pregnant at this point, and I think that had a kind of impact on the way that we organized ourselves and planned things, because I was really keen to do an event before I had a small baby, because I thought there would be a really, really long gap afterwards when I was organizing my life. And it just wouldn't happen. And we could have sort of started by forming a committee and getting funding and getting our governance right. But we just didn't even know if it was going to work. So we were really keen to kind of to try it out and see what would happen if we just pulled this together on a wing and a prayer, and borrowed a venue, and just put the ask out and asked people. And we felt like if it worked, there would be lots of enthusiasm around it that we could then channel into all that kind of practical stuff that needs to get done. So we tried to do things hand in hand. So there we were. It was 2 weeks before Christmas, hence the tinsel.
So sorry,
James.
I don't want to interrupt too much, but just to say, if the chat isn't working for you, there is a working live chat in the shared note.
I don't have a link to that, because you showed it in the chat and I can't see the chat.
At the bottom of the description. So if you scroll down, there's a kind of link that you can copy and paste into a new tab.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, great.
And you can find the shared notes there. So if anyone is having trouble using the chat on the right, there is a live chat in the notes link at the bottom. Super. Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
That's good to know.
And I hope people can see the screen okay. All right, so there we were. None of us had ever been to a repair cafe before. None had ever taken place in Northern Ireland. It was 2 weeks before Christmas, so the height of Christmas shopping. And there was an kind of unexpected cold snap and ice and snow everywhere. So we didn't even know if anyone was going to walk through the door. But we kind of took a leap of faith and went forward. And when the first person walked through the door with something to get fixed, we're all so excited that we nearly bit our hand off. And she brought a massage chair, which was a very big item to get fixed. And it was just an amazing morning. It just came together and it just worked. We had about, I think, 50 people came along. We fixed over 40 items, and we were just entirely hooked. And we've gone on from there to kind of do regular events. I'm going to hand back to Leigh again to tell us a little bit more about some specific repairs.
Yeah. So yeah, as Chris said, we just had no idea what to expect, and we were so delighted when just one person turned up. But this collection of images here with this toaster fix, I suppose when I was thinking about preparing for today, like this was the moment for me where I kind of connected with the depth of what we were doing and how special it was. And it was, I just hadn't anticipated that at all. So this is Dada in the red jumper. He's one of our fixers, one of our Italian contingent. We have a few Italian fixers who didn't know each other beforehand and have got to know each other through the repair cafe, which is really lovely. And And Quentin here in the stripy top brought a toaster along to our first repair cafe. And I was, so Chris and I do a lot of kind of floating about at repair cafes to make sure things are going okay and people are okay, and our fixers get a cup of tea because they're so focused that they forget to drink and eat. And I walked past Dada working on this toaster, and it was like, oh, we need to test whether it's working or not. Has anybody got any bread? And I was also working in the kitchen that day, so I was like, oh, I have bread, and ran down, got a slice of bread, and then David put it in the toaster and pushed the button down, and then me, Dada and Quentin all watched the toaster toasting some bread. Which is, you know, it's a bit like watching paint dry. Normally, you wouldn't choose to spend your Saturday morning doing that, but the moment when it popped up and it was toasted was like, I nearly cried, and that was a surprise to me. But I was just kind of really captured that there's something really special happening here, and that shared experience. The three of us had never met before, and to stand there and the delight at what Dada had done for Quentin, who had never met before, and I had an opportunity to share that moment as well. It's just really special and has stayed with me since we had that first event, and is the story that I tell people about our first event, and just that the surprise at crying at being at a toaster getting fixed, and I suppose that we, you know, part of what we're talking about when we talk about stories is how do we connect with human beings, and that those emotions really matter to this work that we're doing, and you know that human beings are emotional, and they're and that those and they're connected to their objects and stuff that matters, and this is just a really lovely example of the kind of magic. We talk a lot about the kind of the magic and joy that happens at repair cafes and how important that is. So, oh, and this is another great story. This was our third repair cafe, I think, and in a lovely big old church hall in North Belfast. So we move around to different parts of Belfast because it's a big city with particular challenges around how people move around a city or don't. And so this particular repair cafe was with Loveworks, who are a cooperative who operate in North Belfast. And this was their first Saturday running a cafe because they make really, really great food and bread. And we were able to work with them to bring people to their cafe, and they brought people to our repair cafe. Partnership, working, collaboration is really important to us. And at that particular event, this lady here brought along her petrol lawnmower. Stephen had a good look at it. It just really needed a clean, like a lot of stuff that people bring along. And when Stephen had given it a clean and pulled the cord to get it going and it started up, 100 people in the hall clapped and cheered at the same time. And it was completely spontaneous, and it was really wonderful. And again, I welled up when that happened and was struck by how magical it was, and that people understood how wonderful it was to get something going again after they thought it was, you know, you're thinking that you're going to have to throw it away and you don't really want to do that with it. So so that was a really great moment, and especially just a couple of repair cafes in that, and where the fixing at community level and that shared experience is something that we think is really powerful, and that we really like to put a lot of focus on. So there are loads of people who can fix things and are fixing things in their sheds and at their kitchen tables and sitting on their sofas, and that's really amazing. But when we bring them all together in community and make those visible and tangible, and we all connect through it, we think that that's really powerful and can really play a significant role in creating the change that we want to see around repair and wider climate issues.
I suppose when we're doing repair cafes, it's really easy to fixate on the objects, and as Lee alluded to there, you know, it's really helpful for us to remember that whatever people have brought along is precious to them. It might be something that they use every day or they really value, but they care enough about it to come down and sit on a Saturday morning and wait in a queue. And sometimes people wait queue for an hour or an hour and a half to be seen at Belfast Repair Cafe. We have some demand and supply issues, but they, you know, they're willing to do that because it matters to them, and kind of for us, kind of getting beyond the objects and thinking about the people and what's important to them. So if Lee puts up the next slide, I mean, a kind of reminder of that was this woman who came along with her hairdryer, and it just, I mean, it was a hairdryer. It's just a very kind of everyday object, and it was Michael there. It was his first time as a repairer, and he volunteered with us that day, and he fixed up this repair. And at the end, Joanne just came and she offered herself this story that this hairdryer was really important to her because her sister had died of cancer at Christmas, and she had given her the hairdryer as a gift, and when it had broken, she just couldn't bear to part with it. It was a kind of a little connection to her who had passed away, and so she was so, a smile on her face, she was so delighted to have it back in action and working. And so, I mean, for us, we don't really even necessarily always know the importance of the things that people bring, but when they share that story with us, it kind of reminds us why we're doing it. And it is about, I mean, the statistics are helpful, and the kind of knowing that you're doing your bit for the planet is helpful, but actually doing something which is meaningful and makes a difference and moves another person is really part of what keeps us going. And the other stories that I suppose are really important to us are the stories of people who volunteer and are part of the Repair Cafe, because they're really what makes it. And we're fortunate to have, and I'm sure you also in your repair projects have, a lot of really talented and dedicated and interesting people, and kind of hearing about them and where their skills came from and telling those stories is really important, because people often come and they look around the room and they say, isn't it a shame nobody knows how to fix anything anymore and these skills are all dying? And we're like, can you see what's happening in this room? Can you see what's going on? But being able to tell those stories and point to specific people and say, this is what this person is doing with their skills, they're giving it back to the community, they're giving it to repair, is really important. So this is one of our fixers. This is Ricky. Just had a significant birthday last week. And Ricky, he's wearing there, I don't know if you can tell, his overalls from the shipyards. He started in the Belfast shipyards as an apprentice with the guy he's standing next to, and I think you can see in the next picture, John. So Ricky was an electrical engineer, John was a mechanical engineer, and they were apprentices together in the shipyards and worked together on the big Harland and Wolff cranes that you see hanging over the Belfast skyline. And now one of them got, I can't remember how they both got involved, but they've come together since the beginning, since our second event. And they would barely miss it, and they fix together side by side, and they just bring so much character and so much warmth. And there was a great fix at one of our recent events where somebody had got an old toy out of the attic and the pair of them were working on it together, and this kind of quite reserved couple who hadn't been to a Repair Cafe before came along, and after spending like an hour trying to, you know, sitting with Ricky and John and getting this thing fixed, when it was mended, there were hugs all around, and you know, it was just a really kind of, their demeanor had transformed in the time they've been at the Repair Cafe, which was really lovely. Let's move on and see some of our other people.
And just that, you know, that experience was so wonderful for them. And we were in West Belfast, which we have struggled to find good locations in. And you know, we were, and it was their sons, that had brought their son's toy and their grandson's toy. So they were bound to go home and tell their family, you know, show what was fixed and tell their family the story of being at the Repair Cafe. And that, you know, that helps us to make more connections and to bring more people in. You know, it was just like they were so delighted with what happened and so touched that someone had spent so much time fixing stuff that mattered to them. So there we go.
So this is Clive. Clive was one of our first volunteers, and we miss him now because he's moved to England. But Clive was a chartered accountant for 30 years, and he got involved. He's a born fixer, fixed everything for his family. And he said after about 6 months of being involved in the Repair Cafe that he felt he was quite introverted, and he really was getting involved for the fixing and the tinkering with objects, and he volunteered on the committee and helped us out as treasurer, which was amazing as well. But after 6 months he realized that actually he got more out of the connections and the social side of things, and it had really surprised him because that wasn't what he thought he was interested in and wasn't why he thought he was getting involved. And then next I think we've got Rachel. Do we?
Yep. There she is.
I only put the slide projection together a couple of days ago. I can't remember. There's Rachel. Rachel was at our very first Repair Cafe as a sewer, and she's been there nearly every time since. And she's taught sewing, and we're really lucky to have a great, strong fixing team. And I suppose I chose this slide because it's a reminder that it's not always the stories about our fixers and our volunteers and the people who get involved, but also the people who come. And she has often mended lots of small sewing jobs that are brought by one gentleman called Ronnie, and his wife used to fix a lot of things, do all the mending and the sewing and sewing on buttons and all those small repairs. And she has she's got older, and she has dementia, and she's not able to do it, and Ronnie is a carer for her now. And he comes out to the Repair Cafe. He barely misses an event actually now, and he brings lots of really small jobs that he could potentially learn to do himself, but he comes and he sits and he chats and he stays all morning, and he's just a lovely presence, and I think he really gets a lot out of being there and staying with us all morning. And we like to think that everybody brings something to the table. It's not just our volunteers or our fixers, but if it wasn't for the members of the public bringing their broken items, there would be no Repair Cafe. So they are as much a part of what we do and as much a part of the story as our fixers.
Yeah,
I'm just handing back to you.
Yes, thank you, Chris. I'm just saying, Stuart's asked if we operate an appointment system, and we don't. And that's kind of very specific choice, intentional choice on our part. Later on, we didn't kind of talk about what the structure of the session looked like, but we're going to come back later on and talk a bit more about the specifics of how we actually work. And we'll pick that up again then, Stuart. So those are kind of, give you a glimpse of the stories that we have collected and since we got started, and again, just the stories that we tell after we come home from a Repair Cafe, and I tell my dad how it was that day, and I suppose just that we instinctively as human beings, collect little vignettes to share that experience with other people who weren't there, and that we noticed fairly early on that doing that got such a strong positive reaction from people who hadn't been along, because most people would say they found it so hard to visualize because they'd never been to a Repair Cafe before, and that the way that we were able to invite them in and connect them with the idea was to share with them those stories, and make it really human and real for them. And then, like I alluded to it a bit earlier on, we've kind of got the connection between the personal and the organizational and the systemic is important to us, and we're kind of weaving our way through those, what happens in Repair Cafes, and then building a bigger movement all the time. And part of that is about operating in different parts of Belfast, not just staying in one place, so that we, make space for new people to come and be involved all the time. And that has worked well for us. And then also about our relationships with other organisations, with the council in Belfast. We don't have our own space, so we work in partnership with lots of different organisations that do have their own space, and really love us coming and holding a Repair Cafe. They think it's a really good use of their space. So we've been very lucky and never had to pay for a venue to hold our Repair Cafe. think we can like at least 16 different partners in terms of hosting repair cafes since we got started. Belfast City Council also gave us some money to hold a one-day event exploring community responses to waste that we held in March last year. And we also, at our second repair cafe, we worked with a local theatre company who had a play called A Man Who Fell to Pieces, which was about mental health issues. And one of their characters was a fixer. And they'd heard about our repair cafe and really wanted to connect with a different community with their play. We had a repair cafe in the morning, and then they put the play on in the afternoon for everybody who was involved in the repair cafe, whether that was volunteers or people who had brought something to get fixed in the morning. So that just allows us to continue to connect with lots of different people and invite as many people as possible to be part of repair and to get them to think about living their lives differently. And not in a waggy finger way, because we are still learning to do that ourselves. And you know, we're not saying that we have it all sorted out at all, but here's something that you can do when it's really difficult to understand how you can do what you can do to have an impact in terms of the climate emergency. But this is one thing that you can just start doing today. You can sew a button on, and that, you know, and you can think about repairing something instead of throwing it away. So that, you know, just connecting with as many people as possible and building up a network is really, really important to how we operate in Belfast and right across Northern Ireland, in fact. So, Chris?
Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to mention, or just we have a slide there of us just in the last 6 months we've started to, in response to a lot of inquiries from other communities that are interested in starting repair cafes. Well, initially they were interested in us coming and doing a repair cafe in their town, and we felt that wasn't our place, because actually being rooted in the local community and having those relationships across the city is really important to us. And also we just simply don't have capacity. So in partnership with Restart, we started helping other communities to start their own repair cafes. And for us, doing this work of telling our story and telling the individual stories so that people really understand what's going on below the surface of a repair cafe, and they understand the kind of opportunities for people to connect and relate and be changed by coming to a repair cafe, has been a really important part of the way we've done that, I suppose. Before we go on, I suppose we just wanted to take a wee minute and say, why do we put such emphasis on telling stories? And then we wanted to kind of allow a bit of opportunity for you to reflect on whether that's your experience, whether you've done something similar, how you've used stories. There's some questions in the pad about how we use them and some of the practicalities of collecting stories and using them online, etc. And we're going to touch on that in the second half of the session. So that's great. Keep those questions coming. So I suppose the first thing about why we use stories is it helps people to relate to what we're doing. It doesn't just seem like something for people who are techie or people who are practical or people who are kind of very eco-conscious and kind of live in a certain lifestyle. Being able to tell stories of lots and lots of different individuals who come with lots of different kinds of objects and different motivations really helps everybody to plug into what we're doing and see that it's actually about people, and it's about people who are all kind of struggling with the same issues of stuff breaking and feeling frustrated that you can't get it fixed and that it doesn't last, and all of those things. We all kind of face those struggles. As Lee mentioned, it's emotional work, and we certainly find in the morning of a repair cafe, there's a real energy in the room, and it's kind of intense, and it's maybe tapping into all those little experiences and those little stories that everybody's having collectively in the room. And anybody who's watched The Repair Shop on television, as kind of beautifully lit and wonderful as it is, you know, that makes it far away from what we're doing and the mess and the kind of being in a church hall and all the bustle of everything. It's about emotion, isn't it? And it's about kind of what moves people and what's important to people. And that's, you know, a story is a great way of again, cutting through. It's positive, it gives hope. And it kind of, and for us, like in our experience, hope is what really inspires people to change. It's not necessarily statistics or guilt or being preached at or logic that makes us kind of ask, well, what can I do? How do, you know, make people feel motivated to do something differently? It's that kind of glimpse of a different way of doing things, and that sense that a different way is possible. And I think when we can tell the story of one person or one object or one event, one community, and the impact that it's made, it kind of starts to make people see what's possible and to kind of multiply that up and realize that things could be different. It also demystifies what we're doing at a repair cafe, because I think before people come, sometimes it can be hard to imagine, it can be hard to kind of get it. And certainly when we're talking to communities that have never had a repair cafe there, people have a lot of questions about practicalities and how you organize it, and will I feel silly if I bring something and it doesn't, you know, the repair was really simple and I should have known. So being able to kind of tell those really simple little stories, and they don't all have to be about something really life-changing or really amazing or some real family antique or the 60-year-old doll that came on the Queen Mary, but even just those little things says this person is as welcome as anybody else, and you don't need to feel worried about coming to a repair cafe with whatever it is you've brought. No one's going to judge you for bringing a flat screen TV. Nobody's going to laugh at you if it was only the fuse that needed changed. So it kind of can remove barriers to come in. And also when people can see that's somebody just like me, you know, they're kind of older or younger or, you know, whatever it is, they've brought their kids and they've been welcome and they've got their thing fixed. So maybe I could go as well and it would be okay. And the other thing about it is I think it keeps us going and our volunteers. And certainly we know there's a lot of chat the whole way, you know, the whole way through Repair Cafe, and people are sitting there getting to know each other. They're hearing about the item as it's being fixed. And I think that kind of interaction and that kind of exchange is what encourages people to keep coming and keep coming back and feel like they're making a difference. So it's like, it's kind of, yeah, it's fuel for the kind of all the planning meetings and all the kind of hard work that needs to go on behind the scenes. It keeps us going. So yeah, those are some of the reasons why for us, this storytelling approach is so important and has been so helpful in trying to communicate what we do.
Yeah. So we were going to open it up a bit for a bit of chat now, and we're kind of interested in whether what we're saying resonates with you and how you work, and if you're using any stories to talk about your repair project. And we also, obviously there's some questions there in the talking stack as well, and I don't know about you, but I'm starting to feel a bit like Chris and I are just talking to each other. And it feels a bit odd. And you might have noticed, but we're quite into human interaction. So if anybody wants to use their come to stage button to ask a question, even if it's a question that you've put in this talking stack, that would be really lovely. So we can have a bit of conversation for 10 or 15 minutes.
Hi. I thought I would just go first.
No.
I'm not first on the list.
Hi, Janet.
Hi. Maybe I can fold in Vanessa's question. So I asked, well, I have two questions. One I think is less provocative than the other. But the first is, yeah, do you guys celebrate like these stories on a blog or online? And I think Vanessa asked that like on social media. But more interestingly, do you, and Ugo and I tried to do this in the early years, like celebrate the birthdays of your work. So, you know, time was every June we would host a party only for us and kind of celebrate together. And we would do a bit of that storytelling. But sadly, in recent years, well, in this year it wasn't possible, but in recent years, we've done a little bit less of that. So I'm just wondering if you do that. And then my other question is, you mentioned this emotional work. And you mentioned this emotional work, and I couldn't help but notice that you are both women and that many of the people who host repair events are women. And I take that this is really important for us and we choose to do it. It's not though as though we're like oppressing ourselves, but should we be aware of that? And for example, should we be trying to encourage more men to take on these roles of emotional work and emotional labor? And for example, when I get a man who can both fix and is interested in the emotional labor, I put him on the emotional piece. I'm like, we have enough male fixers, you know. So anyway, just wondering how you would react to that point. I'll leave the stage.
I think it's an interesting question, and I think Lee and I have often observed that having a project which is not only led by women but co-led, and that's kind of very much how we have done things, that we've shared them together, has been an interesting model of leadership that perhaps is not always prevalent. I would sort of say, reflecting on our organising, as we say, there's the two of us, and due to our circumstances and the fact that we were on career break, we have maybe been a bit more front and centre, but there's a big team involved, and there are lots of men who are involved in the organising as well. You know, the example of Clive there, who was our first treasurer and on the committee, and who hadn't signed up for emotional work, but I think was opened up to it by his experience of being involved in the Au Pair Cafe, was kind of really interesting. And I also think, you know, the kind of emotional work is in the fixing as well. And I certainly can see, you know, because of we're very fortunate in the kind of role we have, which is kind of quite floating around sometimes, and maybe a little bit of troubleshooting, a little bit of helping people who need something organized or some problem with the venue. But we're able to have this overview that not many people have of the events. And generally there's somebody else on the welcome desk, and actually one of our regular volunteers, who's also on our committee, who's on the welcome desk, is a man and welcomes people in and gives them that kind of welcome. I think we're all doing emotional work, and I think we're all working on it as well, and figuring out how do we make people feel welcome and inclusive. And I think those one-to-one conversations that are happening with the male fixers, I mean, definitely you're aware of emotional depths there that may not be apparent from the outside.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and it's not necessarily something that we've thought about framed like that. But like when you asked that question, I thought about, so to answer your question about celebrations, yes. So we have celebrated our birthdays and at Repair Cafes, so that everybody is part of that celebration. And then this year in when was that? January. This year's weird, right? Time's gone really weird. We had our first AGM, and we had a party rather than a meeting. And so one of the things that we do, which is kind of for later, but it makes sense to talk about it now, is we stick up a flip chart page, and we write, what did you get fixed on it? And we leave loads of pens and encourage people to capture, preferably draw their item that they got fixed, rather than just loads of words on a page. But it changes at each session, and it depends who starts, and sometimes the kids get hold of the pens and it just becomes a big mess, and they're my favorites. So to some extent, like, that storytelling as it happens, so people can see what other people got fixed, and it's really like organic and a bit messy and colorful, and it draws your eye. But what it also is, a really lovely record for us of each Repair Cafe. So at our AGM, like, and when we have our information evenings for the development work that we're doing in other communities, we stick those up on the wall, because people always say, what types of things do you fix? And I have photographs of those posters on my phone, and I'm just talking to random people about Repair Cafes. That's one of the questions they ask, and I show them the poster, and it's just more engaging than me going toasters, bikes, clothes, you know. It's like, here, this is what happens, and this is how people engage at our Repair Cafes. But also at our last one, I read a poem at the end, which was about repair and a slightly broken world, and we all had a cry, and including Dada, who you saw fixing the toaster earlier on. So I think, although we have created a lot of space to acknowledge the emotional work that goes on, and that we really value that and we think it's important. So there's kind of an openness, I think, in our repair cafes and in our conversations to acknowledge that, and the humanity in the room when we have our repair cafes, when we get together to celebrate. And so, you know, like I can see Dada crying, and I can, and then, you know, when I think about our fixers and how much time and care is taken, and, you know, that, you know, and we're very, very clear, there's no leaving anything behind and walking away. You know, you sit with your fixer while your thing's getting fixed, and you can see the relationship developing. And so, and that's emotional work too. You know, it's not, and we're very, so one of our fundamental kind of values is that this is about relationships, not about a transaction. And that we're, that, you know, we take care of that. We take care of each other as we're in whatever work we're doing, and that we prize relationships over everything else. So that, like, we spent a lot of time, and we continue to spend a lot of time thinking about our culture and what we care about, and that we model those behaviors. So, you know, I am not a fan of a pop-up stand, and the temptation is to write down your values and then stick them up in a pop-up stand and stick them in the corner of a room, and that's it, that's sorted. And we've really tried to, like, we're trying to create a new world here, even if it's just on a Saturday morning for a few hours. So it's how we live and breathe and model our values as we work with everybody. And that has created space for everyone to be human and to be emotional.
Just going to chip in with one more practicality. So after our events, we always serve a simple lunch for our volunteers, and that is a place where a lot of stories are shared and people can kind of decompress after a busy morning. And sometimes it's a story of, boys at air, I had a really hard time with that one person, they just wouldn't go, or whatever it is. But it's just a space to kind of, amongst ourselves, exchange our stories that we've had from the morning. And so again, like, there are men and women there sharing in whatever way they want to do that, and you can see that kind of, people have had different experiences, but we've also plugged into a shared experience, and everyone's reflecting on that and thinking about that. Don't know if there's other questions or other comments people want to make.
Does anybody else want to come to the stage? I'm kind of reluctant to pick a question in case someone wants to step up and then we've spoiled your moment. What was that? Oh, so, and Janet also said then about, you know, do we have a blog, or where do we collate our stories? Chris, do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if we should kind of move on to kind of, we were going to chat a wee bit about how we use these stories and some of the practicalities about gathering them, and then maybe we can have a bit more time for questions and discussion at the end. People are thinking about things. Do you want to start, Lee, by talking about what happens at the events that kind of opens up that story space, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we do with them after?
Sure. So I suppose, you know, like with our "What did you get fixed" posters, we spend a lot of time thinking about what it feels like to arrive at a repair cafe, and how we, so just to answer Stuart's question from earlier on, we don't have an appointment system. And so, and we're like, everyone's got kind of different setups. We're all volunteers, and you know, there sometimes we're challenged in terms of the amount of time to organize what goes on. So one of the reasons we don't have an appointment system is that we don't really have the capacity and the resources to manage that. But also it's a drop in, and for us, an appointment system starts to move towards a transaction, and it creates a different expectation of your relationship. So we have a few mantras, and one of them is that we are community, not a service. Obviously there's a service element to what we do, but that we didn't want a kind of service mentality to dominate how we operate. So we choose to focus more strongly on the community element. So it's like, it's probably not convenient for some people, and some people have to wait quite a long time. But actually, you know, a lot of their pairs, it's like, how long is a piece of string? And we're not, you know, even if we started thinking about it, not entirely sure how you would make an appointment service work. So we find that it helps to really manage expectations a lot by saying to people, we don't know if we'll be able to fix your thing. Most people aren't able to describe what's wrong with their item before they come along, and so we always kind of, when we communicate with people before repair cafes, we'll say, look, it's a bit of a punt, but people go away having had a really lovely time, even if their thing isn't fixed, and generally they have more information and kind of know where they stand. So there are no guarantees, but you know, if you're up for that, come along, and kind of managing that expectation, particularly when, you know, quite a lot of the people that come to our repair cafes have never been to a repair cafe before, is quite important to us. So and then when they arrive, that they feel really welcome, because they don't, you know, it's a bit weird and they don't really know what to expect. So we have a welcome desk that's got a few volunteers working on it, depending on the volume of people coming through the repair cafe, and you know, we check with them about, have they been before, and support them through that process. So whenever we were doing some development work recently, one of the things we do is invite the new group along to our repair cafe, and one of the potential volunteers was like, you really need a conveyor belt to sort this out, because it can be a wee bit messy, and we're okay with a wee bit of mess. Actually, we value it, and a conveyor belt like that, that's not what we want. We don't want that to be what people's experience is when they come along, that they're just on a conveyor belt being passed along and their things fixed and then they go away. We don't think that that's a really great experience, and we don't think that that's a thing that's going to connect with people at an emotional level, which will help them to think about how they can change their own behaviours. And so we spend time thinking, you know, taking care of people when they arrive. They still have to fill in a form so that we can kind of manage that, the fixing process for them. One of the things that we do is we just have a sticky name badge, and everybody wears a name badge, everyone, all the volunteers and everybody who brings something to get fixed. And there's no differentiation, so there's no kind of like, all the volunteers have a green pen so that you can easily differentiate between people, because it's a community and we want everybody to feel like they have a role and a part in it. And in my experience, when I go to events and there's a way of differentiating, it starts to become a bit hierarchical, and some people have more value than others, and we don't want it to feel like that. And that name badge is unusual for people to have an opportunity to do that. We give them a pen, write your own name badge, and then, like, it has a really practical use as well, because it helps us find people. But what I really notice it does is, you can say, "Hiya John, how are you getting on? Did you get your TV fixed yet?" And that allows for a stronger connection with people when you're able to just look at their badge and see their name, and they feel more a part of what's happening. So like that, and it's such a simple thing, but it works really, really well. So, and then the other thing, so we have a cafe and people donate baking, and we have some people who are, you know, who manage the cafe. So, and we're always really clear, you know, people will often say to us, I'd love to volunteer, but I can't fix anything. And we're like, oh, don't worry, there is a role for everyone at a repair cafe. And it's really important that we bring non-fixers in, because also, like, you find that they can fix stuff, they're just not confident about it. So we have big tables at our in our cafe spaces to encourage people to sit with strangers, Yeah, and obviously, like at the minute, that's not possible. And we haven't. I know somebody's mentioned in the chat about, you know, concerns around what coronavirus means for repair cafes, and we have not worked through what that means for us. And that it is very concerning. And then I wanted to get fixed posters, and then that you have some people who don't have an assigned role who can, like us, like, you know, it's lovely role just to get to float about the place and see what's happening, and understand how all the pieces fit together is really useful as well, to see, because we're trying to encourage our volunteers to take on different roles occasionally. So if you're a fixer, maybe work in a cafe if there's enough sewers at that particular repair cafe, so that everybody can understand the different parts of a repair cafe system. To encourage, because sometimes some of our fixers get totally engrossed in a fix and it takes an hour and a half, and there are some people that we have to turn away, and that's partly because if you're just a fixer at a table, you don't get to understand that there are other people waiting over here, and the various different things that go on to make a repair cafe work. So we want to encourage people to move around and do different roles within the repair cafe, but that's a work in progress. We're still trying to do that.
So I suppose one of the things about this kind of aspect of our repair cafe is that it highlights that range of skills that can kind of come together and make our events work. And I mean, we do, it is natural that there's a tendency to focus on the fixers, but we have tried not to do that and to talk about other people. And I know there were some questions there on the chat about how do you get enough non-fixers involved. And it can be a tricky one. For us, it hasn't really been, because I think people have most of our volunteers come from having come to an event and then saying, this is really lovely, I'd like to be involved. So, you know, having the kind of means to kind of take people further on the volunteering journey from there. But I think also kind of valuing people who are behind the scenes as well, so that they're kind of appreciated and understand their place in the whole system. We have tended to try and have one person whose role it is to do kind of story gathering at an event. So sometimes I do that, and sometimes there's somebody else who would do that. And we have at times used our social media to put the ask out for somebody who's interested in photography and social media or writing to kind of volunteer for that role, and that's their specific role. And that's really nice then, because they are freed from any other responsibilities and kind of able to float around and get to know people. I suppose the other thing that's really helpful to us at this point is a lot of people who will have heard about Repair Cafe Belfast will have heard about it through a story. They'll have seen a specific repair story or a specific kind of example, either online or firsthand from a friend. And we have, like, actually we've surveyed people about how they heard about us, and I think it's about 40% have heard from word of mouth. So from an individual who has not just got something fixed and you know, found that handy, but they found it interesting enough that they have gone and told other people about it, and those people have then come to Repair Cafe. And another, the next most common way that people have heard is through Facebook. And we haven't been recently because of coronavirus, but we are usually quite active on Facebook and would be sharing 2 to 3 stories a week as a way of you know, publicising our next event, letting people know what's going on, and letting people know what our Repair Cafe is really all about. So that would be one of our main channels. We also use Twitter, and we also have an Instagram account, but I'll be honest, we're not very active on it, simply due to capacity and having to kind of choose a couple of things to kind of stay on top of. Janet asked earlier if we have a blog. We do have a website and a blog. It is woefully neglected, again, due to other demands on our time. But we did, for our first few Repair Cafes, we did sort of a little write-up of the kind of the stories from the event. So you can actually look at our website there. It's on WordPress. If you just Google Repair Cafe Belfast, we did like a little narrative of the event and the people who came, what they brought, and what they, you know, kind of quirky little stories. And that was really nice, and particularly at first when nobody had been to a repair cafe, or the idea wasn't very common here in Northern Ireland, it was really good to be able to kind of share those. And the first one we called Stories of Repair and Restoration, and just the kind of sense that it was about something beyond just fixed and practical things, but actually people left feeling restored themselves as well as their items. We also use our little repair form that people write in what they've brought for repair, and we use that to sort of help us manage the queue and everything, but it also has a space where people can tell us their reflections and stories, or kind of anything else they'd like to share. And people do use that sometimes to kind of tell us a bit more about what they've brought and what their experience has been, which is really lovely. And then we have those, and we can use that, you know, when we're kind of talking to funders or talking to other communities or whatever. We have that kind of first-hand feedback. That form also includes a consent for photographs, a consent box that people have to tick if they're willing for us to take their picture and use it. And then we just make sure that whoever's taking photographs is kind of clued into that, and then checking individually with the person when they're going around the room. Are you happy enough? Have you ticked the box? Are you okay with having your photograph taken and shared to help publicize Repair Cafe? We also just put up, just on another practical note, we have little posters to say that photography and videoing is going on, and just to let the photographer know, or the kind of the welcome desk know if you're not comfortable with that, just so that people have the option. Some of those lovely pictures in our presentation there, that was a kind of friendly photographer from one of our partner organizations. He came along to get his television fixed, actually, but he brought his camera and took some really, really lovely pictures, which have been used. They've been used in The Independent, they've been used on our website. And so if you have a friendly photographer, or you could put a shout out for one, having a stock of good pictures, again, really helps to humanize and communicate what goes on at a repair cafe. So we use the stories in a variety of ways, and I think the fact that we have them when we're talking and doing these workshops with new communities, this is what bubbles to the surface for me and Lee, I think, because we have found it such a great way to communicate the difference that a repair cafe makes. When we have had then media opportunities, or, you know, inquiries from the BBC or from you know, different kind of outlets, we kind of have a stock of stories there to tell them, ready to go. So that's really helpful. And then we use them like online. They're the bread and butter of our social media, and kind of, yeah, occasionally when we get around to putting them on the website, they're there. We just check. So I think those are just some of the practicalities about how we do it. And checking my notes. Yeah, I think that's everything we wanted to maybe mention.
Hi, I'm Stuart. I run the Reading Repair Cafe, and we got sort of quite a different story to your sort of genesis, in that we grew out of Reading Hackspace, and so we were you know, largely fixers, and we've struggled to get non-fixers, organisers, and you know, to do all the social emotional part of fixing involved. And I really like some of the comments you've made about things. I've just been having a look at your website, and that's really good. These are all the bits I think we've just don't put your head in shame. It's far better than our website.
Very old.
And I like the you know, that to have you know, an easel up and some pens, and, you know, sort of draw pictures of your fixes and things like that, because that's one side we don't really capture very well. We've had some, you know, people, some photographs and things like that, but, you know, the question I'd like to, which is something we've been discussing in repair cafes before, etc., is about, you know, the repair shop on TV is very much, here's my thing, give it to a professional and they do it, whereas we are very much about, we are helping you fix your thing. It's not a repair service. It's an education, is as much an education process as a fixing service. You only really you know, sort of own and understand and have, you know, agency over your device once you've been able to open it up and fix it. how much of, sort of education is part of what you do?
I think we very much kind of meet people where they're at with that, and I don't think we prejudge it. So sometimes people will come and they'll be keen to be part of the repair process, and we encourage repairers to show them what they're doing and to involve them. And other people lack the confidence, or they're attending with small children, and it's simply not practical. So I think it's also something that we wanted to consider how we could be a bit more deliberate about, because there's a lot going on in the morning of a repair cafe for us, and our events have become rather big. So I suppose it kind of is a bit of a case-by-case basis, and sometimes I think it's happening more than others. But we wanted to sort of explore how we could have maybe little parallel workshops where we would kind of teach different skills or different things, or show people what's inside their objects, but we haven't really cracked that one yet. In terms of your question, Stuart, just about getting other people involved with maybe a broader range of motivations and skills, I think for us that has been really important, to have people who have the capacity to focus on that, and not simply to be in the kind of in the midst of fixing things. So I don't know if it's possible for you to kind of put a shout out if you've got a bit of a social media following, and see if there's people that would. I think oftentimes people are really supportive of what we do, and they want to get involved, but they don't think their skills are valued because they don't know how to fix stuff. And so sometimes the invitation to kind of come and not be a fixer but be involved in other aspects is really good. And hopefully some of the really simple things that that Lee has shared about how we set up our events, and having that board that everybody can contribute to, may also, be changes that you can make right away, and see if they work for you, and help. There's Bobby. Now we know your name, Bobby. Did you have a question you wanted to come in with?
Yeah, sorry, it says me, not Bobby. I don't know why.
No, it says Bobby now. We can see Bobby now.
Okay. It's more a sort of help, really. I'm trying to get my head around how you use storytelling to evaluate your work, because I work for Devon County Council. I've run a repair cafe, Chudfix, just the one before coronavirus hit. It was a fab success. We have about 9 repair cafes across Devon. We promote and support them because I'm part of the waste management department.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to make a case that goes beyond the data, and I want to use stories, but I have to somehow make those stories feel like a proper evaluation method, not just lovely PR stories. So I was wondering if you had any experience around that, and I've shared a link to it in the shared document about one other thing I've been reading around by the old fire station in Oxford, where they're using an evaluation method, but I'm still struggling to get my head around it. So just wondered if you had any pointers.
Lee, do you want to?
Sorry, it's not an easy question.
Yeah, well, partly, so we collect data with our forums, and we collect stories, but we haven't set up any kind of formal evaluation processes. So I wouldn't want to give you the impression that we've got that licked. But they're essentially, even the stories that we share on social media, they're case studies. That's what they are. And I suppose for us, I'm thinking about, depending on who we're talking to, that say, so we got some money from Awards for All from the lottery, so they have a strong focus. I used to work for the lottery as well, so the strong community focus, and being able to demonstrate the impact in terms of on individuals and at a community level is, we can demonstrate that through the numbers of people who come through the door and where they come from, but also through then the stories. And funders will tell you that they're all about the beneficiary numbers and other data that you can collect, but actually funders are human beings, and if you can share some stories that make them cry, it will quite often have quite a useful impact. And that's kind of from my, you know, they're just human beings too. They might put lots of processes in place that make it look like there aren't human beings that work there, you know. So like, not, I don't mean that, like, you know, I don't mean to be manipulative. That's absolutely not what we're about. But there is, I think, so to kind of go a wee bit deeper, I think that way there is a collective sense that the way we're living our lives is not good for us and it's not good for the planet. And we see that when people come to Repair Cafe, particularly for the first time, that there is, you know, that people are like sad because something's broken and they don't want to throw it away. They don't want to feel responsible for that going to landfill. But they're also a bit lost. You know, they don't know, you know, they feel like they have no options and no other way of living their lives. And like projects like ours show another way, you know, and that's really, that's the thing that really connects with people, I think, you know, especially when they first arrive and go, oh, and that it's not, and that it's about sharing skills and sharing knowledge, and that, you know, it's not going to cost a fortune. And so those, I think that, you know, that bigger story, I think is important to communicate, but it's through the data and then those individual stories that make a difference to people too. That hasn't really answered your question, but
that's okay. That's fine.
You know,
You haven't answered my question because you haven't managed to do it, but that doesn't make it any less valuable. We just need to find a way. You know, working in waste management, it's very data orientated.
Yeah, of
and
course.
It's run, all the people who make the decisions are, you know, engineers and very mathematical minds, and I'm trying to bring that human element in. Don't get me wrong, they're a great team I work with, they're fab, and we're doing good things, but I need to bring that human element in. So
I know, and that's that, you know, it depends on who your audience is and what matters for them, but engineers are also people too, you know.
Absolutely, and many of them help at the repair cafes and they're fantastic.
Yeah.
I think
I know, like it's a challenge, and it's what are you doing the evaluation for and who are you doing it for, like all those things, so there's no easy answers.
All right, well, thank you.
No, thanks for your question.
It's all right.
There was a question there in the chat just about our so from Panda, you mentioned the bubble and the example of the lawnmower with many people spontaneously clapping. It gives the impression that your events are loud. At the same time, you mentioned including people who might not attend. Do you try to be inclusive for people who have difficulties with noise, including neurodivergent people and people with mental ill health? So just wanted to make sure that we picked that up. So some of our repair cafes can be loud, and as Chris mentioned, they have got busier and busier, and we kind of started noticing this year that maybe they're starting to reach the point where we're at capacity in lots of ways, in terms of the numbers of volunteers involved, the spaces that we use. We use a particularly large church hall, and it was full. So we think probably that we need to think about how we react to that kind of new information coming into us, and that event probably for some people would have been too loud and quite off-putting. So we've always kind of had a sense that kind of resist the growth narrative, that so we don't want to just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And what we might do, so when we talk about our development work with other communities, helping them set up repair cafes, the analogy we use is that we are taking a cutting from our repair cafe. So that's our learning, that we go and share with other people to help them get up and running. But it's rooted, that cutting is rooted in that particular place with those particular people who want to get the repair cafe up and running. And so, you know, that it is very much connected in with that place and that context and those relationships in that particular place that will make that thing work. So I think potentially longer term, what that might mean for us is that we look into holding smaller potentially quieter, more inclusive for some people events that might be more focused on, you know, sewing repairs, or we might split off across the city and have like more fixed locations, north, south, east, or west. Like, these are just things that we've talked about. It's all up in the air at the minute. And
I think just to say that I think the current crisis, I mean, obviously we've suspended everything we're doing since February. We haven't had the capacity to do stuff online, and we've been nervous about raising anybody's expectations that we could do anything for them in this time. But I think that is going to kickstart that conversation about what our events look like and how we make them perhaps a bit more manageable without losing the real spirit of them. So yeah.
And that, but you know, so I think that's definitely I think that's a really good point, and not necessarily something that we've paid enough attention to so far. But we also know from what we see at our repair cafes that they're more inclusive than other places, and we work really hard at making sure that everybody feels welcome. And that you know, there's some stories that we could tell that we choose not to because they're a bit exploitative, but that those things, you know, there are signals there that that we're achieving something in terms of building inclusive spaces, but there's always more work to do. And thanks for asking that question, because it kind of we need to think about that more.
Yeah, on just chipping in on we've been running Zoom sessions during the lockdown, more just to keep the repairers connected and involved in sort of you know, at a social level rather than much else. We have been invited, you know, we've been sort of, we started them as basically a repair advice session. So, you know, you could connect in and get some advice on how to approach your fix and things like that. We've done a little bit of that, but very little. It's mostly been just sort of a social aspect to keep the repair community, the community of repairers, in touch and involved. So you know, that might be a way in which you can you know, angle that.
Yeah, great. Just to say as well, Stuart, just while you're like, we'd actually, our first event was in a hack space, and so we have connected with like there are probably, well, some Fab Lab as well in Belfast. We had a young woman from there who volunteered with us too. And there's always more that we could do as well. You know, I think this has been the real challenge for us. Both of us were when we first got involved, we weren't doing any other work, so we were able to dedicate a lot of time and thinking to how we would shape this and get it up and running. I've had to go back to work. Chris is, you know, Ailey came along. Chris has some kids to look after and is working as well. So, you know, this is the challenge for us about how we continue to build this work around other stuff. You know, we got a grant from Restart that has helped us to do that development work, paid us for a bit of that. But the Repair Cafe in Belfast is entirely voluntary. And we have conversations about that all the time. You know, that at the minute, that's mostly going to stay like that, and then we get a bit of paid work to do the development work outside Belfast and support other people to get repair cafes up and running. There's always, like, there's loads of relationships that we'd really love to spend time developing, and we think would be really useful. And again, and at a kind of policy strategy level as well, there's a climate commission has been set up in Belfast, that we're really keen to connect with, because our experience is that people working at policy and strategy level from an event I went to. They're quite keen at saying, you know, things need to happen at community level, but they never invite people who are already doing stuff at community level, certainly in Northern Ireland. So we want to be able to stand up and say, it's already happening, actually. And it's not just us, there are other people who are doing great stuff at a community level too. So there's plenty more work to do.
Already just on again to say, like, it's about 20 past, so
yeah,
we might have time for one very quick final question, possibly, if anyone has one. Otherwise, we might need to start thinking about wrapping up, possibly. Unfortunately, I mean, I think, Lee, in our test session, you said we could talk about this kind of stuff indefinitely, all day.
yeah, I do like to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I want to keep going, but I think we ought to probably start wrapping up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
well, the conversation can go on in other places and other times.
Absolutely. As well. And actually, Pan's just posted a link in the chat on the Etherpad shared document to a conversation about his question, and there are plenty of other conversations on that forum to continue these kinds of discussions.
Great.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much both for coming and speaking to us today. I think it's been really phenomenal hearing your story and how you're kind of approaching all the different challenges that we're all facing. So yeah, a big thank you to you and to everyone else who's here.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll let you have the final word. I'll go off stage now.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting us to take part. And yeah, you might have noticed that we really love talking about this stuff. And it's great to connect with some other people. We're always up for some new connections, new relationships, and learning from each other. We're plenty more to learn about how to do this. So thanks.
Wonderful. Oh, final admin note before we close. The final session of Fixfest is happening on Thursday, and that's the 11th and last session for Fixfest 2020, Fixfest UK. And it's all about repair data, how and why we collect it, how it can change the world, and why it's important. So do come along to that. In the meantime, have a great rest of the weekend.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for coming along.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.